Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to have two very special guests in Mark Hughes and Mark Bowen. Welcome to the show, guys. How are you?
Very good. Hi, how are you?
Brilliant. It was an absolute pleasure to get some messages, good luck messages from you back in December when we were doing our charity fundraiser, so thanks very much for that. But it's a great time to talk to the pair of you. It's two incredible careers in the world of football. I've been looking at the fact that you're both the same age, you both come from Wales. I know it's a big place, but you're both from the same area. Did you ever come into contact with each other through youth and schoolboy football before you made the grade?
Yeah, well, we're actually not from the same area. We're North and South Walians, so Mark's from the south. You'll recognise that from the tilt in his voice, whereas I'm from up north. And we first met in schoolboy football, played under 15s together. So that's where the connection started.
Oh, that's excellent, because I know, looking through your careers, obviously internationally and in management, your paths have crossed and you have worked together, hence the reason we're all having a chat today. So, I mean, two young guys coming through school football, coming through youth football to today and everything that you have achieved, it must be tremendous to still have that connection, like, you know, a lifelong friendship. I mean, how is that when you're working together? Who takes the lead? What kind of role do you have, Mark Bowen? What kind of role do you have, Mark Hughes?
Well, if I can say, very much Mark was the lead. Obviously, he's the manager. But I'll tell you one funny story, if you like, Paul John. But we'd been doing our coaching badges together, and both obviously the same age, more or less, give a month or so. And I think Mark was at Blackburn Rovers at the time, and I was I'd just finished before it. I did a short stint at Wigan Athletic, and. So Mark, cut a long story short, we'd been doing the coaching badges together, and Mark got the Welsh national team job. And in the way that I do, I rang him up and basically said, well, when do we start? It was like automatic. I was going to be going with Mark, and he sort of, put in his way, well, just hold on a minute, Mark, we'll have to have a look at things. So very kindly, if you like, at the time, he brought me into the Welsh setup with the under-21s with a solid old coach called Jimmy Shoulder, who was very experienced at the time, and just said, look, come on board with Jimmy doing the under-21s and I'll have a look at things. So, and I think he just wanted, yes, we were friends, but he wanted to see sort of my personality around players, how I worked and whatever. And where I was lucky at the time, it used to be a situation where the Welsh senior team and the under-21s were in different hotels and trained at different times. But around that time, we sort of travelled together and we're in the same sort of environment. So luckily for me, if you like, I think 2 or 3 games later, he'd seen the way I was working with the young lads and invited me then to go on board with him and Eddie Nisvisky with the senior side. Mm-hmm. And that was, for me, I look back, that was the start, if you like, of my coaching career from then on in. And, we had a good relationship going on from there.
When you think about your introduction to management, Mark Hughes, and it's at international level, well known as a Welsh goal-scoring legend, how difficult is it to instill a kind of culture when you're not working with the players week in, week out, as you would be doing and as you later did at club level? Do you think that's a big challenge for an international manager?
Yeah, it can be problematic. Ideally, you want more time after games, if I'm honest, because you want to review, you want to go through everything that's gone well, what hasn't gone so well. You want to be able to work on that, which clearly you can do at a club situation. But so that was a frustration, because you knew there were elements that needed to be worked on, and you didn't have that opportunity. But for me personally, as a young coach, a young manager going into my first job, I was still playing, so that was difficult. But I made a conscious decision that I wasn't going to continue my international career. As soon as I got the job, I decided to stop playing, and I separated both roles. So when I was back at my clubs, I was still very much a player. But as soon as I came into the international fold, then I quickly switched to being a manager. And I have to say, as a young coach, it was the best thing I could have ever hoped for, because it exposed me to every element that football management throws at you, probably more so because it was so condensed in a short space of time. But after the game, when everybody went back to the clubs, it gave me that breathing space to understand what had gone on and how well I'd done as an individual and how well we'd done as a group. And that breathing space allowed me to be better next time, because I'd give myself a quick slap and say, goodness me, you got to be better than you were last time. So you'd like to think that the next game you would be better and better again. So I had 4 years of that. So come the time when I made the decision to go into club football, I felt very much ready for the nip and tuck of Premier League football. And I think that's why sometimes players with a good playing record and a good career get opportunities, and that's what happened to me. I got the opportunity of Welsh national manager because I'd had a good career. But you've still got to be able to do the job. And sometimes going into management, I'll hold my hands up. I didn't really know what I was doing from one game to the next initially. But thankfully that period of time allowed me to understand what I wanted from my teams. Whereas I think you see other so-called big name players going straight into management, and sometimes they fall flat on their face. So I'm forever grateful for that first opportunity from the Welsh FA.
Definitely. Another big thing, and I think it does happen in other jobs, but when you're looking at football, in your earlier coaching / managerial career, you're managing players who you've perhaps played alongside, and they've been your mates, and obviously you've travelled with them, etc. How difficult do you find that, Mark Bowen? First of all, how hard is it to differentiate between I'm now the gaffer rather than I'm part of this team?
I think it's you are there to be shot at, and I think it's earning their trust, and we've always said that top professionals and top players, they want direction, they want structure, they want discipline in their lives, they want to see what's happening in the day-to-day work that they're doing. So you feel, I know I did, and you feel very much aware that you've got to make that impression on them early. You don't get too long, if you like, that if they draw conclusions about the way you work and about your personality early on, it's hard to turn that round. So I think once you get through that spirit, and the same applies, I suppose, when you first go into even, all right, that was at the start of the coaching career, but even when you go into every new job that you go into, there's no doubt about it. You feel, I think you'd be lying if you say you didn't feel a little bit of pressure to make an instant impact on people, to show them that, if you like, you know what you're doing, and you got their best interests at heart, and you can improve players as well.
I think a story that John Hartson once told me about being the player under Mark Hughes at Wales is that, there was always this willingness from the team to do the best they could for the gaffer. And I know there are so many occasions in the past where we see that isn't the case. We hear all the cliches about players downing tools, etc. But you narrowly missed out on qualifying for the Euro Championships in 2004, Mark. When you look back on that, and obviously the success that Wales have had since then as well, do you think you'd ever get back into international management?
Yeah, it's not something that I dismiss because I've done it so early in my career. I actually did it. Well, everybody said I did it the wrong way around. You're supposed to do international management towards the fag end of your career, but I did it at the beginning, maybe, so it was a little bit different. But I have to say, when I got the Welsh job, Welsh football was in a little bit of a situation, bit of turmoil. If we're honest, we weren't playing particularly well, and the support and the way we travelled, the way we went about our business wasn't where it needed to be. And myself, having been at top clubs, I used to get frustrated going to Welsh squads. I used to enjoy it because I used to love meeting up, playing for my country. But the stuff around the edges and the quality of kit, travel, facilities, pitches, all that was wrong and wasn't at the level it should have been for international football. So a big part of my job was just to make us understand the level that we needed to be at, and I think the players appreciated that and saw that early on. I was trying to do the best for them, and in fairness to the guys, you're right in saying that they were my teammates, and it could have been more difficult for them than it actually was for me telling them as ex-teammates. But I think they were so keen for me to be a success in the role because we had a number of years of mediocrity, if we're honest. So I had that support from them right from the off, and that was invaluable. And I'd like to think in the time I was there, we just pushed things on and made maybe the Welsh FA understand the standards that they should be adhering to. And I think that's possibly carried on when Wales has gone on to great success. I think those initial few years, certainly in my reign, I think probably helped the mindset of the FAW.
Oh, definitely. What do you think, Mark Bowen?
Yeah, I just think as well it was the infrastructure behind things. To add what Mark was saying then, very quickly Mark sort of, made decisions to change the hotel where we stayed to get the training ground better. We moved actually, which people really questioned, including the Welsh FA themselves, questioned the fact that Mark wanted to play at the new national stadium, Mm-hmm. And, Wales were having crowds, I think, around about, was it 10,000 for games and whatever? And
if we're lucky.
Yeah, if we're lucky. And I think Mark's last game, I think there was 75,000, when we played Azerbaijan at home, which would have been completely unthinkable. We actually very proud of the fact, if you like, a lot of people were shouting me down with this in Wales, but we'd actually turned it around where football became the number one sort of spectator sport, really, instead of the rugby situation, which I'll probably get hammered for saying that, but it was...
That's not bad coming from a South Walian ball.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But I think in fairness, I can add to that, Paul John, that we, every manager who goes into a club has a situation where you invariably go into a club because things aren't right, for whatever reason. And I think it goes under the radar. If I might say this about Mark's situation, that all the clubs we've been at, you go in and it's having to address situations and the culture, identity behind the scenes and get that right, which I think he's had his thumb on right over the last 17, 20 years, whatever we've been working.
I think it's really interesting to look at the foundations being, put in place by yourselves, and then the success that then came for Wales. I remember sitting on the couch in Scotland watching Wales and willing them to do well, obviously under Chris Coleman years later, and the documentary that came out by Johnny Owen to look at the success of Wales. So it's key to look at the foundations of that and how obviously you set them on their way, and now you're looking at Wales and you're looking at some of the world-class players that are playing for them. As a Scottish fan, having not had that experience for about 22, 23 years now, being in the finals, looking at Wales and supporting them as a Scotsman, it was tremendous. So yeah, absolutely, you should definitely take credit for the foundations that were laid. Now, going further a wee bit back about your club game as players, I remember sitting, Mark Hughes, watching the 1991 European Cup Winners' Cup final. It was live on the TV in Scotland that night. Great, superb, because I've always had, I've always had an affinity with Barcelona as well. You look at them down the years, the players they've had. And I remember the big kind of chat around that game is the fact that you spent a couple of years at Barcelona. You scored the 2 goals that night. But again, Mark Bowen, you've had success as a player in Europe, and you look at the Norwich side, particularly, I know you were also part of the Spurs side in the early 80s. How important is it from a managerial perspective, that European success? Because back then, even as a Scotsman watching the Norwich run, for example, the Bayern Munich games, Mark, the introduction of Chris Sutton into the Norwich team, you're aware of all this. I mean, it spreads throughout the country. And then watching Man United live, it's a massive thing, European success. How big is it for you as managers and your ambitions as managers?
Well, from my point of view, I was always a real student of the game, and these European nights were always special. Certainly, when I was playing for Man United, I used to call it a crackle in the crowd when you had European nights, and those were really great games under floodlights. It always seemed to be a little bit quicker the pitch, a little bit of dew on the grass, and I used to love those games. And thankfully, we had a modicum of success, had a great run. We were flying the flag for English football at that time, because we were the first team allowed back into Europe after the Heysel disaster. So certainly we felt after 5 years out of Europe, we felt we needed to make a good fist of it and try and go as far as we could in the competition. As it was, we found ourselves up against my old team, Barcelona, and thankfully we came out on top. But a great night, fond memories, obviously. Scored a couple of goals, one maybe a little bit dubious, but it's certainly I had the last touch. Steve Bruce won't thank me. I don't think he's ever forgiven me for knocking her over the line, but as I said, I was just doing my job, so that was my excuse. So, European nights were always very special. Really, really enjoyed them.
What about yourself, Mark? A team like Norwich, I once said to Chris Sutton that they were an unfashionable side, and he took offence to that. But what I said to him was, Norwich, would I normally be looking at Norwich up in Scotland? Probably not. But at that time, the third place finish in the league, the UEFA Cup run, it was fantastic to see an unfancied side doing well in Europe.
Yeah, certainly in Europe. Well, week in, week out, I think at the time, we had a really good side. And it came together well, and we had a certain way of playing football or trying to play football. We always felt we were trying to punch above our weight, especially in Europe, and the run, the UEFA Cup run that we had was special. And again, every game we went into was as the underdogs, basically, and going out to Bayern Munich at the time, being the first, I still think we're the only ones, but certainly the first at the time, first English club to go there and win on their stadium, the Olympic Stadium. And we actually got knocked out by Inter Milan in the quarterfinals and they went on to win it. And I still say to this day, I think the two games against Inter Milan were very closely matched things. I think Dennis Bergkamp nicked a goal in both ties, really. And I mean nicked a goal because we played really well in the ties. But we came out with a lot of credit. And I think maybe, I say this in hindsight, if we had maybe the mentality of, like say, Mark being a Manchester United player or whatever, I think maybe I'm wrong saying that we even playing the likes of Inter Milan in the quarterfinals, we probably lost the games, the two legs, because we had a little bit of an inferiority complex. Instead of actually thinking, well, we're as good as these, we can go and beat them. That's what probably cost us in that tie there. But yeah, I mean that mindset of punching above your weight and going into those European games, because it is a different state of mind, obviously, from the week in, week out games that you play. It's got that little special tag to it, and like Mark said, it's got that little edge, a little different feeling, isn't it, going into it?
There's talk all the time about competitions changing, European competitions changing. What's been lost, do you think, when you look back to the old style European Cup? Obviously it became the Champions League, the Cup Winners' Cup that we no longer have, the UEFA Cup going into Europa League. Do you think it's lost any of the romance of European football? Do you think it's for the better that we've changed it?
I'm a little bit of a romantic. I think I quite like the competition's been straight knockouts, but I understand why it's changed. Clearly, the amount of money, TV money around European football, notably the Champions League. Obviously, they need more games to get the wider viewing figures up to justify the fees that they're paying for football these days. But I just think it focused the minds a little bit more so, where when you knew you only had two legs and away goals and all that all factored in, and I think sometimes when I watch some Champions League group games, some of them are dead rubbers too early, and there's only a certain number of clubs that will end up at the top of the table. But I think, it could be slimmed down somewhat, maybe. But in saying that, I mean, when you get the big teams going on head to head, more often than not, once they get through the group stages, then that's when the competition really begins in earnest, and you see the quality of the teams in Europe going head to head, and that's when the Champions League starts to really form.
Looking at the managerial record as well, qualifying and playing in Europe for Blackburn, Manchester City, Fulham, and perhaps looking ahead to your next move in the world of football, how important is it that European football may also be part of any future job that you take on?
Well, it is there. I mean, we've experienced it on numerous occasions, had good nights and poorer nights, as everybody who's been in football any length of time will tell you. But European nights, I've always figured highly in my career, both playing wise and in management. We had great runs with Man City. Went into Europe with Blackburn as well. Had good results against big teams. Paris Saint-Germain, I think we played Hamburg, all big European teams, and always acquitted ourselves really well. And it was always a different test. It was always different from your week in, week out league football, and because they would set problems for you that you had to solve, and then you had to have the answer very quickly, because if you didn't realise what was going on tactically, then you could be very quickly out of the tie. And I think that's where my experience as an international manager came to the fore, because invariably during my time as Welsh team manager, we played all the big countries, everybody. We didn't duck anybody. We played Italy, Germany, almost anybody you can imagine, Argentina, Brazil, everybody came to the national stadium, and we had to be right tactically and physically. If we weren't, then we would get a doing. But for the most part, we gave a good account of ourselves, and I think that helped when we went up against big European teams, because we had that experience of international football when really you were the underdog going into these games, and you had to make sure you didn't go under tactically, because these guys would set you major problems.
Mark Bowen, I'm going to ask you, Mark Hughes said there about focusing the mind on the kind of knockout games, and you've also touched on it as well. When it comes to a mentality, when it comes to trying to tap into players to get them tuned in for the big game or the week-to-week games in club football, how difficult is that, and how difficult is it at the sharp end of football, the pressure that's constantly on managers and coaches, the media attention now, social media attention? How difficult is that for a football manager?
I think it's all to do, from my point of view, with the culture and the way you have your day-to-day, if you like, work in life within the club, to make sure that the demands are always there on the players, which is the hardest thing. All players who go to, whether it be Manchester City, whether it be a Celtic, whether it be whatever, they're good players, by the very nature that they've arrived at the club. But it's the mental side of things, which more and more, as over the years, that's the key thing, to get that motivation into them. And it's not just the manager and his staff putting demands on the players. It's creating that culture where the players themselves put demands on each other. They don't accept second best. They don't accept casualness in not just say 3 o'clock on a Saturday, but right through the week. You can't just, I suppose, if you're a Lionel Messi, but you can't, even Cristiano Ronaldo trains 100% every day. You have to have mentality within your club, the culture, the identity of your work in life day to day, that we are this team, and we don't accept any mediocrity around us to the best of our ability. Mark always said when we first started coaching, he didn't want to, and relaying back to what he said about creating the right environment, with facilities even. You want to get to a Saturday, if you play on a Saturday, things change these days, but you want to get to a situation where, if you use the anachronism, but it's 5 o'clock on a Saturday, you've got beat. You don't want the players, because we all know footballers are like. We've been them ourselves, Mark and I, that if they can find an excuse, they will. So you don't want a situation where if you lose on a Saturday, it's 5 o'clock, and the player goes in, and says, well, it was because we didn't do this right, or we didn't do that right, or this wasn't quite right on Friday or Thursday. you wanted the players in their own minds to be saying, if you came in and you said a few choice words to them at 5 o'clock because they hadn't performed, that they would basically just sit there and accept it because they'd think, well, yeah, because you guys have given us everything we needed. The tactical awareness, the build-up to the game, everything, the information, and it didn't work on a Saturday because, look at myself, I didn't quite perform. Put my hand up. But you try to take that sort of excuse environment out of it, which creates the results, the sustainability results, really.
Looking back to what you were saying about the Welsh setup when you moved into international football management, and there was a lot of things that had to change to instill that culture, Mark, and the mentality and just the way that you were going to be doing it and create an identity. Were there occasions, Mark Hughes, in your club management where you've gone into a club and you had to have that transformation as well?
Yeah, if I'm honest, probably every club situation we walked into was similar. Probably the only one that didn't have a great deal of work to be done in terms of facilities was Blackburn Rovers, which was a fantastic setup. The only thing wrong with it was that they had this, I think they spent about £10 million on their training ground when Sir Jack Walker was there, and it was a fantastic facility. The only thing from my point of view is that the first team facility was down a hill and about 3/4 less of a size. So all the academy guys were all up at this state-of-the-art facility at the top of the hill. We were down the bottom with not enough space to really grow and become what I wanted the team to be. So after my first year at Blackburn, I made the decision, which politically was a little bit hard to get through, but I made the decision that we were going to swap and we were going to go up and use the state-of-the-art facilities at the top of the hill, and the youngsters would have to use the building that we were in. But from my point of view, I thought it was a good decision on a lot of levels, because first and foremost we needed the right facilities to grow ourselves, and we obviously were the head of the football department in terms of having to go out there on a Saturday and win games to make sure the club was sustainable. But for the academy players and the young players, the fact that where they lived was actually right next door to the academy buildings, so I always felt it was good that they had to every day walk past the pitches that we were playing on, walk past the facilities that were there for them. They had to walk all the way down the hill and earn the right to come back up the hill and train on the pitches that we were training on. And from that point of view, an aspirational point of view, I think it was a good lesson for all the younger players at the club. I think there is always a danger you give them too much too soon, and then they're not hungry enough. So that was part of the decision behind swapping the facilities over.
Excellent.
Same can be said of Man City. I mean, people would suspect, and I did myself, that the reason I left Blackburn Rovers was because I wanted to go the next step, and I viewed Man City as a big stage, big club. And I got a little bit of a rude awakening when I walked through the door, because in terms of facilities and what they had on offer to prepare the first team, it was way below what I just left at Blackburn. So we had to have a big revamp of all the training facilities there as well. It helped that when the new ownership group came in from Abu Dhabi, I think they completely revamped the whole structure in terms of the training ground and the gym area. I think we went away for a week pre-season training. We came back and it had all been done. So they had the resources and the ability to do that.
When I look at the Manchester City time that you spent there, Mark, and I look at some of the players that you managed and many of the players that you brought in yourself, and the key one that always stands out for me is Vincent Kompany. When you look at what he went on to achieve after you brought him to the club, the honours are incredible, and it's aligned with the success that Manchester City went on to have. How difficult is it to deal with high profile footballers, possibly big egos? I mean, is that a difficult thing to deal with as well? I mean, it's hard enough dealing with 2 or 3 people that you work with. Imagine managing 20 or 30 footballers. How difficult is that?
Yeah, that's the skill that you have to have. If you haven't got it, then it's going to be difficult to have any longevity in the game as a manager, because players will test you. They'll test your ability to get your message over, and they'll question everything that you do. And you've got to have the answers for them. If you don't, then in their eyes, you diminish somewhat. So you've always got to be prepared. You've always got to maybe preempt what they're likely to ask or demand, and if you're ahead of the game, then you can obviously put things in place before the question's even asked. So we were constantly, as a coaching group, trying to do that and try and preempt what situations might arise if we don't do certain things in a certain way. And I think that helped sustain us and helped us to have that connection with the players that we were in charge of.
Mark Bowen, I always look at footballers who go into management, and it may be a cliched type of question whereby people say, have you used the experiences from other managers to enhance your own approach, etc. And one manager that I think you worked under that Celtic fans will be interested in is Martin O'Neill. I don't think he had a joyous time at Norwich, but what was your memories of the kind of pre-Leicester Martin O'Neill as a manager?
Very impressed at the time, and I think to Norwich's detriment, he had I don't know what the political situation was, but he spent a short space of time there before he went on to Leicester City. I think it was more to do with his relationship probably with the chairman at the time, but obviously I'm not privy to that. But I think the one thing that struck me about Martin was his huge enthusiasm, if you like, to I think it's been well documented. He wasn't really one, I would say, on the training ground in terms of coaching, but the one thing that did stick in my mind was in the dressing room. He'd really get into players' heads in terms of wanting them to go onto that pitch and run through brick walls for him, And and it didn't spend as long as I wanted to with him, but that was the shiny thing that came through to me at the time. I think the one thing when I what Mark was saying as well, in terms of any football club you go into, we went into Manchester City, and they were a club, at that time I would say they were a big name, if you like, but like Mark said, there were certainly things they weren't sort of living up to in terms of performances as a club. And we went in there and there was money being spent, but at the same time there were a group of players, the likes of Micah Richards, Stephen Ireland, Ned Manua, a young lad called Michael Johnson, who was a very, very good midfield player who had to retire through a bad knee injury. But they had a group of youngsters who Mark will correct me if I'm wrong here, they had something like 100 games between them, between them, and they were recognised first-team players, and it was dealing with them then, because they were getting a bit disenfranchised because they would see a lot of like big-name players coming in, and it was almost, yes, we were getting new players in, which is a job in itself to get them integrated and into the mentality that you want at the club, but also to actually spend time and work with and acknowledge those other players who each one of them went on to play, have had good careers, very good careers, and played a big part. But they could have easily gone under the radar, out of the way, if you like, and just basically not been recognised and end up leaving the club and doing different things. But I think nearly all of them would say they actually had good careers, and so that was another side to it, not just the one about new players coming in and having to make sure they quickly sort of played their part in what was to come, the success what was to come, but looking after and nurturing those younger players, which is, I know we've always had in our mind throughout the places we've been.
I was going to ask you about, youth development. Mark Hughes, at a club like Celtic, we've always prided ourselves on rearing our own talent, and in recent years, after a few years, selling them on. But post-COVID, post-Brexit, how key is youth development going to be to British football clubs? Because I think, since maybe the advent of the Premier League, it's been difficult a lot of the time because there's so much onus on these transfer windows. You've got to spend big, bring in players from all over the world. Like Mark Bowen just said there, it would be easy for a lot of them to fall by the wayside. How important is that focus going to be, do you think, going forward, Mark?
Yeah, I think it will change to the benefit. You'd like to think so. I think fans of any club like to see young talent come through the ranks and put the shirt on, and I think they have a special affinity, I think, with the home fans if you can get young players through, and I think that can sustain you and can actually, as a manager, buy your time because your team might not be functioning, but the young lad's doing well, so you can acknowledge that and benefit from that. So I think youngsters will always have the challenge at the top level of the game. Certainly in the Premier League, it's a world game. It's not just a British league anymore. It's they have the pick of players from all over the world, as I say, Brazil or whatever. I think with Brexit and the difference in the regulations now, other markets may well open up that we weren't privy to or didn't have access to. So that may well change, but that will be a challenge for the younger players coming through. The reality at the top level of the game, certainly in the English Premier League, is that you've got to be an exceptional player to be a Premier League player these days, and that it doesn't matter if you're a young player or whatever. You've got to have that talent, and you look at the lad Foden. Obviously broke through into a very, very good Man City team, but that just shows you the level that he's at as a young player, and a lot of young players won't get opportunities, unfortunately, as well, because obviously their pathway to the first team will be blocked by very, very good players that have got more experience and have been in the game longer than them. So it's a challenge for all young players, as it's always been.
One thing we're seeing at the moment, Mark, is a lot of our young players, certainly from Celtic, are going elsewhere before they've made their debut for Celtic. So we've had a few guys going to Bayern Munich, one of your old clubs, in the last few years. How important do you think it was to your own development, going and sampling the football in Spain and Germany?
Yeah, it certainly helped me. I came back a better player, a more mature person as well. I went there as a young player. I wasn't married. I didn't have that structure behind me, so it was more difficult for me. But I came back a married man with children and a better player as well, because I had that support system around me, which I didn't have when I first went out there. So that's important. I think the game is ever changing. You have to accept that. And I think the key for any management group and anybody working with the players within that club is that you have to have an understanding of where they're coming from. And I think a big part now is understanding your own impact on them as individuals and having an understanding of emotional intelligence and how that affects players and how they deal with the messages you're trying to give them. You can say one thing to one player and say exactly the same thing to another player, and they'll interpret it completely different because the diversity of dressing rooms is really different now. So it's a big challenge for managers and coaches these days.
I think it's important as well, Paul, to be what I would call like well read on things. Like Mark said, the game's changing and evolving all the time, and I think we've always prided ourselves in. Mark always uses the phrase that all coaches are thieves, and so you're always got to be looking at other coaches and managers and what are they doing. And I don't think there's a lot too much new out there, but there's certainly adaptations on things that coaches and managers have always done. I think Mark, myself, we were in the first group of English coaches to ever be granted the pro license back in, I think it's 2004, Mark, wasn't it? Something like that? Long while ago. And it because of that, and since then, you have got to be, I find, on top of things. You can't just basically sit there and think, well, this is the way that I do things or we do things, and it's always been this way. And believe me, there's a lot of coaches, managers out there who are still doing the same things now as they've always done. Yeah. I think, yes, to a degree, if you've been successful doing that, but you've got to be adaptable as well, and then looking at how things change and how you can make your group, your team, your club stronger and better.
When you're looking at that, Mark, and, the advent of data analysis, everybody, even football fans, seem to be getting hung up on stats, but it's incredible the kind of level and the depth that these go to. And a lot of clubs are investing a lot of money in data analysis. How important do you think that will be going forward for management coaching teams?
Well, it's been there for a long time now. I think when I was at the Welsh team, Prozone was just coming to the fore, and I think I was probably one of the first to introduce it at international level when they were still using videotapes and doing it by hand, so to speak. So I've always used the access to data. Clearly, the skill is in extrapolating the key elements of the huge amount of data that's presented to you leading into a game. So that's the skill. You've got to be able to pick the things that are relevant to you as a team and relevant to the opposition that you're up against. If you don't do that, or you haven't got the skill to be able to understand what's important within the reams and reams of data that you're presented with, then it doesn't matter what amount of data you have. If you can't pull that key information out and use it to your own benefit, then you're just as well just flying by the seat of your pants, because you're going to get just the same amount of benefit from it. You've got to have an understanding of how it works, how it attaches itself to the game itself, and you see trends. And we used to work on, and obviously, how many sprints we would do against good opposition. Initially, when we were at Blackburn, I seem to recall our big thing was that we wanted to be strong at the end of games, and we prided ourselves on that. But when the data started coming back, when we went up against the top teams, we noticed that we'd still run probably a third further than them, but we'd get beat because we weren't sprinting as much as them. So it was only through looking at the trends over a period of 4 or 5 years that we understood that actually you've got to sprint harder and you've got to sprint for longer if you're going to overcome the top teams. So those are just elements of it that you pick up along the way.
Well, I think as well, Paul, what I'd add to that is that you have got a situation now where the data is coming so much more into the recruitment of players. You know, and I look at teams, for example, like Brentford in the Championship there in England, where you know, the recruitment is based around, they look at players, how many crosses a player will get in, and you know, in relation to their team, and that's fine. But I think at times that can help, but at the same time, it's hard to put into words. But in as much as a manager has always got to have that, let's say, that final say: is this player? Yes, you can show me all the data on him, but is that player going to fit into? You know, is he going to be the type of player that a fan at Celtic Football Club, for example, wants to see in terms of my style of play, how I want this team to reflect the way I want them to play. So it's all right having all those stats, but at the same time, it surely has to be at the remit of the coach or manager at a certain club you're in. Does he fit into what you see? And if he does, great, because you know managers hang their hat on him then, and you live and die by results that way. But if it doesn't, well, you know, at the end of the day, the finger gets pointed at you, saying, well, yeah, you brought this player in and he's not good. But sometimes it's because it's been done by a different analytic process with the recruitment department.
Yeah, certainly. Now, you mentioned Celtic there, and as I said at the top of the discussion, you sent us a great message around about Christmas time, and at the end of it I had a wee laugh to myself because you said hail hail, and I think that appealed to a lot of Celtic fans. There's a big affinity with Celtic all around the world, and it was great back in the day when players played for 10 years or over, where we would travel all over the place to play in testimonial games. And one such match back in 94 was for Mark Hughes, going down to Old Trafford and playing Manchester United. Mark, what's your memories of Celtic coming down to join you in that celebration?
Well, it was a great night for me personally. I think we just won the double. So we were going to celebrate irrespective of the quality of the game on the night anyway. But obviously, Celtic readily accepted my invitation for them to come down to be the opposition. And we had a great night. The one thing I do remember is that actually after the game, I was sat in the bath, as you did in those days, and just cleaning myself down. And all of a sudden, the police commissioner came in with his cane and everything. And I'm thinking, goodness me, what's going on here? And he made a beeline for me and he said, Mr. Hughes, can we have a word? So goodness knows what I thought at the time. So he said, we've got a little bit of a problem. I said, well, what's happened? And he says, well, the Celtic fans are all behind the goal and they're not going to go home unless you come out and wave to them. So I was soaking wet and naked, and I had to dry myself off very quickly, go out and put a Celtic shirt on and stand and have a photo before they would all go home. So that was a great moment, a great memory, and thankfully they did at some point.
No, that's superb, Mark. And you know, when you're looking back at that Manchester United team, obviously managed by Sir Alex Ferguson, and Mark Bowen said before that all the great coaches are thieves. What do you think you took from the great Alex Ferguson when you went into management yourself?
I think I didn't pick out one element. I'm sure I was fortunate to be managed by a lot of good managers, not least Sir Alex, and invariably you'll pick up things from them that you're not really conscious of. But I think the key was that Sir Alex was always about making sure you give your best, making sure that you didn't leave anything out there. He would make you aware of who you were representing and the responsibility that brings. Certainly when you're wearing the red shirt of Man United, then there was a responsibility to perform at the right level and give everything. And you can never really put your finger on the one thing that I remember particularly, but certainly it was his demand to have the best performance from you as an individual. I think that's what stays with me. There's certainly probably other things that I can't be more specific about, but certainly that is one of the main things he demanded of his players.
When I look back on your managerial career, Mark Hughes, 610 games, I think it is, correct me if I'm wrong, and all at the top level, international level or in the EPL. You've been away from the game for a couple of years, albeit one of those years has been blighted by COVID. But are you now at a stage where you think, I could go back into that, I'm ready to go back into management?
Yeah, I made a conscious decision after I'd left Stoke and Southampton by my last two positions, only because I'd had almost 5 seasons at Stoke and I had a lot of success there, enjoyed my time there. Didn't finish quite how we wanted it to, but albeit given trials and tribulations since we left, maybe it was the right time for both parties. Got the opportunity very quickly to go in at Southampton. I think we only had maybe 5-6 weeks of break, and we were straight in again. So after leaving that position, I just felt I needed probably a good break, a break that I hadn't had for quite some time. So I was always going to take at least 12 to 18 months out, and then look to get back in. Obviously, COVID has reared its devastating head, and it's affected me only in as much as my timetable to get back in, and thankfully not health-wise or anybody close to me. So my timetable's been shifted a little bit, but certainly I've been ready to go back in for a long time now. I don't dismiss any opportunities at home or abroad. I'm a professional football manager, so it's what I do, and if the right opportunity is there, it doesn't matter where in the world it is, I will be interested. So that's never changes. That's always been a constant throughout my managerial career. So I'm looking to get back in. I don't know at this point where it's likely to be or where in the world it will be. It's changing times and difficult times, obviously. But as I said, I'm looking to get back in. It's what I do. It's what I'm comfortable with. And what I'm effective at.
I'm looking forward to your return to the game. Mark Bowen and Mark Hughes, it's been an absolute pleasure for the last 45 minutes or so chatting to you. I could chat to you for a lot longer. Unbelievable football careers. Thank you so much for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Thank you, Paul.